Sansa sat alone in her chamber, the cold stone walls of the Red Keep pressing in on her like a cage. Since her father's execution, the world had turned dark and cruel. Joffrey, her so-called betrothed, had become a monster, and the Lannisters kept her like a prisoner wrapped in silk. They smiled in front of her, but behind closed doors, they twisted her heart with every word, every slap, every threat. She had no one now. Nusepta Mordan, no handmaiden she could trust, no one from Winterfell. No one, she thought. But far beyond the gates of King's Landing, in the shadowed forests outside the city, two shadows moved silently under moonlight. One wore a black cloak with a sword strapped to his back, ghost-white direwolf padding beside him like death itself. The other moved like a whisper, small, fast and angry, a girl with sharp eyes and sharper. Still, it was Jon and Arya. Jon Snow had broken his oath. He had left the wall after learning of Ned Stark's death and hearing whispers of Sansa's suffering in King's Landing. When the Raven came, he held the letter in his hands for hours. The words were written with careful formality, but the hidden cry in them was unmistakable. Sansa needed help. He couldn't stay on the wall. Not after that. He knew he was betraying the Night's Watch, but his blood pulled stronger than any vow, and Arya. He found her by chance, sneaking through the riverlands, surviving on scraps and stolen food. When she saw him, she didn't cry. She just hugged him for a long time and then said, "Let's kill them all." That's how they ended up here, watching the castle from a distance, waiting for the right night. Arya had managed to sneak into the city once already. She dressed like a kitchen boy, slipped in through the mud gate, and came back with a map and something even better. Information. Sansa's kept in Maegor's holdfast, she told Jon while roasting a rabbit over the fire. They keep her guarded, but not all the time. One of the guards, Cerilin, he's always drunk. "We can get in." Jon didn't speak. He just stared into the fire, rubbing Ghost's ears, thinking he didn't like plans. Not ones made so quickly, but time wasn't their ally. Every day Sansa stayed in the capital. She was in danger. The Lannisters played games with people's lives like they were chess pieces. And Joffrey. Jon clenched his fists just thinking of him. That boy didn't deserve a crown. He barely deserved a sword. "We go tomorrow," Jon finally said, "after dark." And so the next night the wolves moved. Arya slipped into the city first, her small frame perfect for shadows. She had grown colder since Jon last saw her. She wasn't just a child anymore. She moved like someone who had seen too much, lost too much. Jon followed a little later, using a hidden tunnel Arya had found during her first trip in. Ghost stayed close, silent as snowfall, his red eyes scanning the dark. They reached Maegor's holdfast just past midnight. Rain started to fall, light but cold. The stone walls were slick, but Arya climbed like a cat. Jon followed slower, heavier but sure. They reached the upper courtyard, where two guards stood watch, half asleep. Arya looked at Jon and nodded. Jon stepped out. "Who's there?" One guard shouted, lifting his spear. Jon didn't answer. He walked straight toward them, sword in hand. The first guard raised his weapon, but never got to use it. Ghost lunged, tearing him down. The second tried to run, but Arya was already behind him. Needles slid into his back, silent and deadly. They moved quickly. Arya knew which room was Sansa's. They reached her door and Jon whispered her name. Nothing. He whispered again, louder. "Sansa." The door creaked open, and Sansa stood there, her face pale, eyes wide. At first, she didn't believe it. She thought it was a dream. "Jon," she whispered, her voice breaking. He didn't answer. He just pulled her into his arms. She broke down, sobbing against his chest. Arya stepped forward, her voice flat. "We need to go. Now." Sansa nodded, wiping her tears. She didn't ask how they got there. She didn't ask what they were planning. She just took Jon's hand, gripped Arya's shoulder, and followed, but getting in was always easier than getting out. And behind them, a shadow moved in the window. Someone had seen. The rain had picked up, tapping against the rooftops like nervous fingers. Jon, Arya, and Sansa moved fast through the dark corridors of the Red Keep. Every step felt heavier than the last, every shadow like a trap waiting to spring. Sansa clung to Jon's arm, her breath shaky but silent. Arya led them, eyes sharp, needle drawn, mind racing. She had gotten in once, but getting out with two people, one in a silken nightdress and the other carrying more anger than a sword could hold, that was another game entirely. Behind them, someone had watched. A boy, a servant, maybe 12, maybe younger. He had been delivering wine to one of the Lannister guards when he saw the strange man and direwolf slip into the holdfast. He didn't say a word, just turned and ran toward the Queen's tower, bare feet slapping the wet stone. Arya didn't know this. Neither did Jon, but the clock had started ticking. "We can't go back through the courtyard," Arya whispered. "They'll be watching it by now." "How do you know?" Jon asked. "Because I would be," she said flatly. Sansa looked back. "There's a garden path," she whispered. "It runs behind the stables, near the armory. I used to walk it when I was allowed to." Jon nodded. "Lead us." It felt wrong, asking Sansa to guide them through her own prison. But she moved with more confidence now. It was as if seeing Jon had reminded her who she really was. Not Joffrey's plaything, not the court's puppet. She was Sansa Stark of Winterfell. She was a wolf. They reached the garden, silent, slick with rain, leaves trembling in the wind. The path was narrow and half-forgotten, curling around a wall that looked climbable if you were quick. Arya went first. She threw a rope down from the top and Jon caught it. He tied it around Sansa, careful not to meet her eyes. Not because he didn't care, but because, if he looked at her too long, his anger would boil over, and anger made mistakes. Sansa climbed, slower than Arya, but steadier than he expected. She'd grown, hardened, survived. Jon followed last. But the moment his feet touched the top of the wall, a horn blew in the distance. Not a war horn, a city alarm. Someone knew. Arya cursed under her breath. "We need to disappear now." They dropped down the other side. Ghost landed silently beside them. The forest outside the city was close, just across the muddy plain near the river. But in open ground they'd be seen. Jon turned to Arya. "We'll take the drainage tunnels," she frowned. "They smell like death. Better than being caught." They ran. Through alleys, side streets, slipping past sleepy guards and barking dogs. Once they ducked behind barrels while a group of gold cloaks rushed past, torches held high. "Find the girl!" one of them shouted. "The Queen wants her alive, not dead." Not yet. That made Jon worry even more. If Cersei wanted her alive, it meant she still had use for her, as bait or as a message to the north. They reached the tunnel mouth behind an abandoned butcher's shop. It was half-flooded, and the air inside stank like rot and rats. Arya didn't flinch. Sansa hesitated just for a moment before Jon offered her his hand again. "Do you trust me?" "I do now," she whispered. They waded through the dark, waist-deep in filthy water. Rats fled their path. The tunnel echoed with every breath. Ghost walked along the side, keeping watch. "We'll come out by the river," Arya said. "We'll need horses." "I hid 2, Jon replied. "Near the old mill." "You planned this far?" He gave a quiet nod. "Didn't come to die." Suddenly, a splash echoed behind them. They all froze. Another splash. Voices. They were being followed. "They're in the tunnel." "Kill the bastard with the wolf! Take the girl alive!" Jon turned, sword already out. Ghost growled, low and sharp. "Keep going!" he shouted. "I'll slow them down." "No!" Sansa cried, grabbing his arm. Arya stepped forward. "We fight. We end this here." She didn't wait for permission. She moved like lightning, sliding through the water toward the figures behind. A scream echoed, followed by a grunt and a splash. Arya returned with blood on her sleeve and a grim look. "There'll be more." Jon grabbed Sansa's hand. "Then we run faster." They burst from the tunnel minutes later, soaked and cold, but alive. The river roared beside them. In the trees beyond, the old mill stood, broken, abandoned, and beside it 2 horses waited. They had made it out of King's Landing, but the chase had just begun. The rain had slowed, but the wind still whipped through the trees like it was trying to speak. The old mill groaned in the night as Jon helped Sansa mount the horse. Arya was already checking the saddlebags. Food, water, maps, and a pouch of coins Jon had stolen from a Lannister trader days ago. They had escaped the Red Keep, but not the danger. "Not even close. Where do we go now?" Sansa asked, her voice raw. North, John said without hesitation. Arya shook her head. Not straight. They'll expect that. By morning, every gate, every road north of the city will be watched. Ravens will fly. Our faces will be everywhere. Then we take the long road, John muttered. We go south first, Sansa blinked. South? To go north, Arya said. Clever. They rode at first light, muddy, tired, and sore. Ghost ran ahead, scouting the road. Birds chirped, like they didn't know the world was full of monsters. Sansa kept glancing over her shoulder, afraid the next hill would bring gold cloaks and swords. John noticed, but didn't speak. He knew that fear. Once it gets into your bones, it doesn't leave easily. By nightfall, they reached a small hamlet, just 5 houses and a stable. No banners, no soldiers, just poor folk trying to survive. Arya slipped off her horse and approached a boy feeding chickens. We need a place to sleep. Any barns? The boy stared, unsure. John stepped forward and dropped a silver stag into the boy's palm. For the trouble, the boy nodded toward a broken fence. Old hay barn. No one's been in it since my da died. You can sleep there. They led the horses inside. The barn smelled of straw and rotted apples, but it was dry. Sansa slumped to the ground, exhausted. Her hands were blistered from riding. Her feet sore. Did you learn to ride like this in King's Landing? Arya asked, trying to lighten the mood. Sansa managed a half-smile. No, I learned to cry in silence. Arya looked down, quiet for a moment. I used to hate you, she said suddenly. When we were kids, Sansa blinked. I know, but I never wanted this for you, Sansa nodded. I know that too. They didn't hug, but something settled between them. Not peace, not forgiveness, but understanding. And that was enough. John stayed by the barn door, sword across his lap. Ghost lay beside him, head on paws, ears twitching at every sound. As the girls fell asleep, John's thoughts drifted to the wall. His brothers, his oath. He had broken everything, and for family. Was he still a man of the Night's Watch? Or just a Stark again? He didn't know anymore. Around midnight he heard movement. Not footsteps, not animals. Voices. He nudged Ghost. The direwolf stood up instantly, fur bristling. She awoke without a word. She grabbed Needle. Sansa sat up slowly, sensing the danger before it was even spoken. John peeked through the slats in the barn wall. 4 men, not gold cloaks, worse, sellswords, hired blades. Dirty armor, mismatched weapons, faces like wolves with no pack. They've got horses, one said. Tracks lead here, another laughed. Heard there's a reward for the Stark girl. We could be lords by sunrise? Arya's eyes narrowed. How'd they find us so fast? John's jaw clenched. Ravens fly faster than horses. He turned to the girls. You two go out the back. Take the horses. If we're not behind you in 10 minutes, ride. Sansa grabbed his hand. John, I'm not losing you again, he said firm. But Arya didn't move. I'm not leaving, she said. I've killed worse men than them. John stared at her, then gave a slight nod. They didn't argue after that. Sansa slipped out the back with 1 horse. John and Arya stayed. The door burst open. The men didn't expect resistance. John stepped forward, sword ready. Arya circled behind them like a shadow. You sure you want to do this? John asked them. The leader sneered. You really think one bastard and a girl can stop 4 blades? John didn't answer. Ghost did. He lunged from the side, ripping into the nearest man before he even drew his sword. Arya moved next, quick and low. Needle slipped between ribs, fast and clean. The leader rushed John, steel clashing. John parried, spun, and slammed his blade into the man's gut with a grunt. Another tried to flee, but Ghost caught him mid-run, dragging him down into the mud. When it was over, the barn smelled like blood and sweat. Arya wiped her blade on a dead man's cloak. They weren't very good, John nodded, breathing hard. They'll send more. They found Sansa waiting near the edge of the woods, pale but safe. Without a word, they mounted again and rode into the night, and behind them, King's Landing burned with new rage. The wolves were free, but the hunt had just begun. The road twisted through hills and forgotten paths, stretching like an old scar across the land. Days passed. Each sunrise brought more silence, more tension. The further they rode, the more it felt like the world was holding its breath, as if it knew something was coming. John had changed. He spoke less, slept lighter. Every branch crack made him grip his sword. Arya noticed but didn't say anything. She had changed too. There was a darkness in her now, something sharp behind her eyes. She didn't just watch the road, she watched everyone. But it was Sansa who had changed the most, no longer the girl in silks dreaming of songs and princes. Her hands were blistered, her lips chapped, but she sat straighter. Her eyes didn't wander like a frightened child's. They focused. She asked questions. She remembered every village, every face. She was learning the road like it was a battlefield. "We'll reach the Riverlands by nightfall," Arya said one morning, checking the map. "The twins are nearby," Jon replied. "Too risky. Walder Frey will sell us to the Lannisters if it makes his supper warmer." Sansa hesitated. "What about Riverrun? My uncle, the Blackfish. He might still be holding it." Jon looked at her. "You think he'll risk the Lannisters' wrath?" Sansa raised her chin. "He's a Tully, and I'm his niece. If he still has blood in his chest, he'll help." Arya nodded. "We try." That night they reached the Riverlands, but Riverrun was not what they remembered. From the hilltop the castle looked ghostly. No lights in the towers, no banners flying, no sounds but the wind whispering through the empty fields. "It's abandoned," Arya muttered. "No," Jon said. "It's under siege," and it was. Campfires glowed in the darkness, surrounding the keep like glowing eyes. Lannister soldiers, hundreds of them. Their red cloaks looked like spilled blood. "Too many," Jon said. "If the Blackfish is inside, he won't last." Sansa stared at the castle, her face blank. "They're trying to erase everything. First father, then Winterfell, now Riverrun." Arya looked at her. "We don't have to let them." But before they could argue, Ghost growled. Someone was watching. Jon turned fast, sword half drawn. From the shadows, a figure stepped out, hooded, cloaked in brown. "Mud caked up to the knees." "Easy," the figure said. The voice was low, gravelly, and familiar. Jon narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" The hood fell back. It was Sandor Clegane, the Hound. Arya's hand went straight to Needle. Jon stepped forward. "You should be dead." Sandor smirked. I should." Sansa stepped back, breathing hard. The last time she had seen him, he was a drunk beast in the Red Keep, threatening to kill knights, cursing at kings, terrifying her at every turn. "What do you want?" Arya asked coldly. "I could ask the same," Sandor said, eyeing them. 3 wolves sneaking through the woods, all looking guilty as sin. Jon didn't lower his sword. "We don't have time for games," Sandor shrugged. "Then don't play 'em." He looked at Sansa for a long moment. "You look different, girl." "So do you," she replied quietly, eyes hard. The silence between them was thick. Then Sandor glanced at Riverrun. "You want in?" Arya crossed her arms. "You going to help us?" Sandor snorted. "Help? No, but I know a way in. Tunnels. Old smugglers used them before your uncle sealed them off. He sealed most of them." "Not all," Jon frowned. "Why would you help us at all?" "Because I hate Lannisters more than I hate you," Sandor muttered. "And because I owe her," he added, nodding towards Sansa. Sansa stiffened. "You never protected me." "I tried. It was the only honest thing," he said. They waited until midnight. The fires below burned low. The camp was quiet. Jon, Arya, and Sandor crept through the tall grass toward the edge of the river, where an old dock had collapsed into the mud. There, hidden behind moss and stones, was a narrow tunnel carved into the riverbank. "You sure it still leads in?" Arya asked. "No," Sandor said. "But I'm going first." He lit a torch and crawled into the tunnel. Arya followed. Jon came last, after whispering to Sansa to wait with Ghost. She hated it, but she knew someone had to stay behind in case it went wrong. Inside the tunnel, the walls were wet, the air thick and heavy. Rats skittered in the corners. The Hound moved fast, faster than expected for someone so big. They emerged in the lower crypts of Riverrun, and before they even got to the stairwell, they heard steel and voices. Not Lannisters. Blackfish soldiers. They were caught, but not by enemies. When Jon stepped into the torchlight, one of the men dropped his spear. "Gods be good." "It's a Stark." Jon didn't smile. "Take us to the Blackfish." Minutes later, they stood face to face with Brynden Tully. Older, thinner but still iron-eyed, and when he saw Jon, Arya and the Hound, he said only one thing: "You're either mad, or the last hope we have." The walls of River Run felt colder than Winterfell ever had. Thick with damp and silence, the castle smelled of dust, smoke, and desperation. Soldiers eyed Jon and Arya with awe and suspicion. They whispered stark, like it was a ghost returning to life. Sansa entered last, escorted by Ghost, her face pale but proud. When the Blackfish saw her, he bowed lower than expected, not as a gesture of politeness, but of grief. "You look just like your mother," he said quietly. Sansa smiled weakly. "She's the only reason I'm still standing." Brynden Tully led them into the great hall, now half ruined by siege fire. Maps and candles covered the war table. He waved off the guards and poured himself a cup of watered wine. "You've done something dangerous," he said to Jon. "Breaking your oath, escaping the capital, bringing a girl every Lannister wants chained to their gate." Jon didn't flinch. "I'd do it again." "Good, because you may not get another chance." Sansa stepped forward. "Uncle, we came for safety, not war." "There's no safety," the Blackfish said, sipping. "Only sides. And you've picked yours." Arya leaned on the table. "Then pick us back." Brynden gave her a long look. "You were always the bold one." "I still am." They explained what happened in King's Landing. The escape. The bounty on Sansa's head. The Lannister scouts already searching the countryside. River Run, already under siege, wouldn't hold long without help. "We need to get north," Jon said. "To rally the bannermen, to take Winterfell back," Brynden scoffed. "The North has already bent the knee to the Boltons." Sansa's face twisted. "The Boltons are traitors. They murdered Robb, my mother." "They married you," Brynden said sharply. The room went silent. Sansa looked away, ashamed. "I didn't choose it. You're still Lady Bolton in their eyes." "That complicates everything," Jon stepped in. "If we show them the North remembers, they'll follow. And if they don't, then I'll fight alone." Sandor laughed in the corner. "You really are Ned Stark's son." Brynden paced the hall, thinking. "There's one way, dangerous, stupid." Arya grinned. "Sounds perfect. If you want to rally the North," the Blackfish said, "you need a banner. Not just a Stark, a victory. Something bold, something loud." He pointed at the map. "There's a Lannister supply convoy heading to Harrenhal, heavily guarded. If we strike it, destroy it, leave nothing behind, the whole Riverlands will hear. And so will the North." Sansa hesitated. "You want us to start a war?" Brynden looked her dead in the eye. "Child, the war never ended. You just stopped fighting." Jon nodded slowly. "We'll do it. I'll send 50 of my best men. You'll have to move fast. Hit hard, disappear." Sansa stepped back. "And what do I do?" "You make them believe," the Blackfish said. "You're the last known Stark in the South. You ride under the Direwolf banner. Let the people see you. Let them remember the name." Jon looked at her. "It's dangerous." Sansa didn't blink. "I'm tired of being locked away. If I can be the sword, I will. But if not, then let me be the flame." That night they prepared. Arya sharpened her blades beside a fire. Jon trained with the Blackfish's men, every strike tighter, harder. Ghost paced the walls, sensing something heavy in the air. Sansa stood on the battlements, staring north. Sandor joined her silently, arms crossed. "You still afraid of fire?" she asked. He grunted. "Not as much as I used to be." They stood there, not friends, not enemies, just survivors. "You didn't have to help us," she said. "I know. Why did you?" He looked away. "Because I never got to kill Joffrey myself. Thought helping you escape his family was the next best thing." Sansa almost smiled. "He died screaming, you know." Sandor let out a rough chuckle. "Good. Before dawn they left River Run. 50 riders. Stark banners stitched from old cloaks. Jon and Arya rode side by side, quiet, focused. Sansa rode behind them, her hair braided in the northern style, her eyes burning with new fire, and as the sun rose behind them, a new whisper began spreading across the Riverlands. "The wolves are back," but they weren't the same wolves that left Winterfell. They were darker now, sharper, and they were hungry. The sun rose red over the hills, casting blood-colored light across the dewy grass. A bad omen, some would say. But to Jon Snow and Arya Stark, it meant something else. It meant war was coming. They lay low among the trees overlooking the winding road where the Lannister supply convoy would pass. 40 men, 10 wagons, twice as many horses, all heavily guarded. Bread, meat, steel, and coin meant for Harrenhal. Meant to feed a war machine, but not today. Today it would all burn. Jon stood beside Arya on a rocky ledge, eyes narrowed as the first wagon rounded the hill. "You still sure about this?" she asked quietly. "No," she smirked. "Good. You're finally thinking like me." Behind them, Blackfish's men, grizzled archers, former farmers turned fighters, and a few young ones, barely old enough to shave, waited for the signal. Arya moved like a shadow between them, giving orders, tightening bows, checking positions. She was younger than most of them, but none questioned her. She wore the Stark name like armor, and her eyes were colder than steel. Jon held Longclaw tight. Ghost crouched beside him, nearly invisible among the rocks, his red eyes glowing. "When do we hit?" a soldier whispered. "When they're comfortable," Jon said. "When they think the worst part of the road is behind them." They waited. The Lannister guards laughed. One lit a pipe. Another pulled his helmet off, wiping sweat from his brow. That's when Jon raised his fist, and the world exploded. Arrows rained from the trees. Screams filled the air. Horses reared. One wagon tipped as its driver fell back, a shaft through his throat. Chaos shattered the line in seconds. Jon charged from the ridge, sword raised, yelling like a storm. Ghost leapt down beside him, tearing into the first man who raised a spear. The Lannisters fought back, but they were scattered, surprised. One soldier tried to regroup his men. Arya slit his throat before he could shout twice. She moved like death in human form, slipping between men, silent and fast. Needles sang in her hand. It was working until it wasn't. One of the wagons, the last in the line, didn't carry food or armor. It carried wildfire. A green jug rolled from the back, cracked open on a rock. Flames licked the grass, then boom, the explosion sent men flying. Horses screamed. Fire swallowed the trees in seconds. 2 of the Blackfish's men were caught in the blast, one still alive and burning. Jon tackled Arya, pulling her down as the shockwave roared over them. Ghost yelped and vanished into the smoke. Arya coughed, ears ringing. "What in the 7 hells?" "They were ready," Jon said, stunned. "They planned for an ambush." In the chaos, a Lannister knight, gold cloak torn, blood on his cheek, spotted them and charged. Jon barely blocked the first strike. Steel met steel in a blur of motion. The knight was older, stronger, brutal with his swings. Jon parried again and again, but he was losing ground. Until Arya stabbed the knight through the calf, he dropped to one knee, and Jon drove Longclaw through his chest. They didn't wait. "Fall back!" Arya shouted. "To the trees, now!" They gathered what survivors they could. Only 19 made it out. Half the supplies burned, but the dead. There were nearly 60 Lannisters left rotting in the mud. Later, by a stream, Arya washed blood off her hands. Jon sat nearby, breathing hard, shirt torn, arm bruised. "That wasn't a victory," he muttered. Arya shook her head. "No, but it was a message." Sansa rode in an hour later with Sandor and 2 scouts, face tight with worry. When she saw the wounded, the smoke in the distance, the blood, she didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She simply dismounted and walked up to Jon. "Did they see the banner?" she asked. Jon nodded. "Good." That night, in the ruins of an old barn, Jon looked over the survivors. He thought of what they'd started, how far they were from home, how many would die before they reached it. Then Arya brought him a piece of parchment, a raven's message. He read it once, then again. "What is it?" she asked. He looked up, stunned. "Sansa's not the only Stark they're hunting now," he said. Arya frowned. "Who?" Jon's voice was barely above a whisper. "Bran. They know he's alive." The fire had burned out, but the smoke still lingered. Even as the wind carried it away, the memory of what happened on the road clung to the survivors like ash on skin. They had struck a blow, yes, but they had bled for it. And now the stakes had changed. Bran was alive, and the Lannisters knew. Jon stood in the doorway of the ruined barn, the raven's message crumpled in his fist. His mind spun. "Who sent this?" he muttered. "Who knows about Bran?" Arya took the parchment from his hand, scanning it again. It says a boy with strange powers crossed the neck, that he was seen near the ruins of Moat Cailin. Traveling north, Sansa looked up sharply. The neck? That's close to the phrase. Jon's jaw tightened. It doesn't make sense. The only ones who knew Bran lived were us. Arya narrowed her eyes. Unless someone sold him out, everyone went quiet. The wind howled through the holes in the roof. In one dark corner, Sandor Clegane leaned against a beam, eyeing them carefully. Could be a trap, he said. Jon glanced his way. Or a warning. Same thing in this world, they decided quickly. If Bran was alive, and if the Lannisters were after him, he wouldn't survive without help. They had to move north, fast, but not all of them. Sansa stepped forward. I should stay. Keep moving through the riverlands. Show the banner. Keep the noise high. Jon frowned. We don't split again. She shook her head. We have to. The North won't rise if they don't believe there's something to rise for. If we vanish chasing shadows, it all dies in silence. Arya sighed. She's right. We raise the North, and then we bring Bran home. Sansa gave her a small smile. And you make sure he stays alive long enough to be found. By dawn, the group split. Sansa, Sandor, and a dozen of Blackfish's best riders continued west, weaving through villages and river crossings, spreading word of the wolves' return. Jon, Arya, and 6 scouts rode north under the grey sky, staying off the roads, cutting through thick woods, and sleeping with swords in hand. It was a different kind of journey now, quieter, more haunted. Jon barely slept. His thoughts were filled with the past. Memories of Bran climbing towers back in Winterfell, smiling at dangers he didn't understand. Now that same boy was out there, hunted, carrying powers none of them could explain, and powers others might want. On the 3rd day, they reached the outskirts of the Neck, swampland, foggy. Twisted trees rose from still waters like skeletons reaching out of graves. They stopped to rest by a half-sunken stone marked with moss and old runes. This place feels cursed, one scout muttered. It always has, Arya said. But not for us. The Crannogmen live here, loyal to the Starks, Jon nodded. If anyone would help Bran, it's Howland Reed. That night, as they made camp near the ruins of a watchtower, something strange happened. Ghost began growling, low, deep, not with fear, but warning. Jon stood immediately, hand on Longclaw. We're not alone. Arya faded into the shadows, blade drawn. Then from the mist, a voice called softly, Snow! Stark! A figure emerged from the trees, thin, hooded, walking slow but steady. His cloak was soaked, but his face was calm, older, wise, and his eyes. One of them was missing, Arya gasped. What? Jon stepped forward. Who are you? The man pulled back his hood. I'm the one who's been protecting your brother, he said. And now I need your help. Because he's gone. It was Howland Reed, father of Meera, friend to Ned Stark, the man who had kept secrets longer than most men stayed alive. Arya moved closer. Gone? What do you mean, gone? Howland knelt beside the fire, warming his hands. His voice cracked with exhaustion. We had him hidden, deep in the swamps, protected by spells and the old gods. But 2 days ago, the magic changed. Something came. Something not of this world, Jon frowned. The Lannisters? No, Howland said. Worse. He looked at Jon, his face pale. They're not just hunting him. They're drawn to him. Something inside him has awakened. Arya went still. What kind of something? Howland stared into the flames. He sees things. From the past. From the future. He dreams of crows and dead men. And when he touches a tree, the tree remembers. Silence fell like a hammer. Jon sat down slowly. That's why they want him. Howland nodded. They don't want to kill him. They want to use him. Jon's fists clenched. Then we find him first. Arya stood. Where do we go? Howland hesitated. He was heading north, beyond the wall. Jon went pale. Arya cursed under her breath, and the wind whispered again. The wolves had survived the Lannisters. Now they had to face the dead. The frost came quickly. By the time Jon, Arya, Ghost, and Howland Reed reached the edge of the wall, snow fell in thick, slow sheets. It clung to their cloaks, their lashes, their thoughts. There were no songs here, just silence and the occasional distant groan of ice shifting, cracking like old bones. Arya looked up at the wall. Even now it felt impossible, as if something so massive couldn't have been built by men. It loomed above them like a god carved in frost. "It's broken," Jon whispered, and it was. A gaping hole stood where the wall once rose, cracked wide like a wound in the world. The Night King had done this. And though he was dead, the scar remained. They passed through quietly, hearts heavy. No brothers of the Night's Watch stood guard now. The wall was a ruin, and the world beyond it, the land of ghosts and memories. "He came this way?" Arya asked, her voice muffled by her scarf. Howland Reed nodded. "Yes, your brother was drawn to the heart tree beyond the shivering forest. Said it was calling him." Jon glanced back. "And you just let him go alone?" "I didn't let him," Howland replied. "I couldn't stop him. The trees here were wrong. Their branches looked like bone, their bark pale as corpses. The air stank of rot beneath the snow. Something was dying out here, or maybe something had never died properly at all. That night, they camped beneath a ruined weirwood. Its red leaves scattered like blood. Arya sat close to the fire, sharpening needle. "I don't like this. Everything's too quiet." Ghost growled low beside her, ears twitching. Jon stared into the flames. "You feel it too? The cold?" she asked. "No, the pull." Howland looked up. "That's the tree? The one Bran went to?" "Yes, it doesn't just remember. It calls. It wants." Arya stood, restless. "Wants what?" Howland didn't answer. The next day, the wind howled louder. Snow whipped across the plains like claws. And then, as they crested a hill, they saw it. The heart tree, twisted and ancient, its face carved in pain, tears of red sap frozen to its bark. And beneath it, a boy. Jon ran. "Bran!" But as he neared, he slowed. It was Bran, yes, taller now, his face gaunt, eyes open wide and glowing faintly white. His hands rested on the roots of the tree. He wasn't asleep. He wasn't awake either. Arya stood behind Jon, breathing hard. "What is he doing?" "He's dreaming," Howland said, "but not like you think." Jon knelt beside Bran. "Can you hear me? It's me." "It's Jon, your brother." Bran didn't blink, but his lips moved. Jon leaned in. "He said your name," Arya whispered. "No," Jon said quietly. "He said run." And then the snow moved. Figures rose from the white like they'd been buried there. Eyes glowing pale blue. Skin grey, frostbitten, dead. But not the mindless whites from before. These things moved with purpose. With anger, Arya's sword was out in seconds. Ghost lunged forward, snarling. Jon stood, drawing Longclaw. "We fight." Howland Reed pulled a blade from his sleeve. Dragonglass, black and wicked. The dead surrounded them. Arya struck first, dancing between two walkers, blade piercing a frozen skull. Jon followed, cutting one down, but they kept coming. More and more, climbing from the snow like it was birthing them. "Where are they coming from?" Arya yelled. Howland shouted, "The tree!" "It remembers too much. It's bringing them back." Bran's body began to glow. The air pulsed. Jon turned to him. "Bran, wake up!" "Please," but Bran didn't move. The light spread from his hands into the roots, pulsing like a heartbeat, and then a scream echoed from deep within the tree. Not Bran, not human. The walkers stopped. They turned, then they fell, one by one, like puppets with cut strings. Bran's body slumped forward, eyes still open. Jon caught him before he hit the snow. "Bran!" Bran blinked slowly. His voice came out dry, weak but clear. "I saw everything." Arya dropped beside him. "You're alive?" Bran looked at her, tears in his eyes. "Not all of me." They carried him back through the ruins of the wall days later, exhausted, wounded, and forever changed. Howland disappeared before they reached the Riverlands. "Too many ghosts," he said, when Sansa saw them riding toward her banner. She cried for the first time in years. The wolves were whole again, but none of them were the same. Jon had broken his vows. Arya had become more blade than girl. Sansa had become fire behind a crown. And Bran had become the memory of the world itself. But the North remembered the Lannisters would fall, and the story of the wolves, the ones who didn't wait, would echo for generations, because in the end, the pack survived.